you guys have got absolutely no idea. So just to sort of explain it, it's actually a model of airbrush. It's an Infinity. It's a model of airbrush made by Harder and Steinbeck, and as I say, the model is Infinity. And we, as the people who sort of partake about in it, you kind of learn things like this is an Infinity. It's a bit like the Velocities, I think it is, isn't it, for Badger. They are, and I forgot what the Iwata version of it is called now, but they are quality airbrushes, if you like. They're the ones that, if you've got the skill to use them, let you use really fine lines and get some really precision work out of them, as opposed to the other brushes which you can do the same thing with, but they take a lot more skill and work to do. And it's sometimes it's as simple as this. The Infinity here, for example, there's a little hole in the nozzle which the paint comes out of. In this one, it is 0.15 millimeters wide. In this one, I think I've got a 0.3 millimeter wide hole in the end. So this one sprays. The spray is a quarter of the size of this one when it comes out of the brush. That's an approximation, but it's a quarter of the size. So, but that means that the precision of the airbrush has got to be, all the internal components has got to be a lot more precise to be able to control that in a way. Because as the smaller the spray, the harder it is to control it precisely. Just because there's less paint coming out of there, a tiny movement can be the difference between some and none. On a larger nozzle, a tiny movement is the difference between some and a bit more. But somebody who has the skill, and Free will probably say things like Drew Blair. I am sure could take something like this, which is an Eclipse, and it's one of the starter ranges for Iwata, is one of the manufacturers of reasonably good quality airbrushes, and there's similar ones for Badger and the others. Can take a brush like this and can do just as well, can do better work than I can do with an Infinity, and that's just skill and practice. But sorry, that's just to explain the shorthand that we use. And every sort of craft or job tends to do that, and it can be a little bit impenetrable for people who are new to it. And even like pyrography, I'll describe this as a flat shader. The flat bit you might understand, but you might not follow why it's a shader, unless I start to explain it, and then talk about spoon shaders, and they do a similar but slightly different job. Some things are better for, and if you're not using these things, then to some extent saying a flat shader to you is a bit like saying a chocolate teapot, or I don't know, a two-wheel car. It kind of is a meaningless thing. Junior, yeah, sure. That's Junior. Verified by the stream to be a reasonable representation of him, because he's appeared on stream a couple of times. Well, I mix in paint cups, I don't have that problem. Free. I've actually never really managed to get a good mix in the cup, even bubbling air through it, but I sometimes do that if it's thickening up a bit. Yeah. I forgot what the Iwata one is as well, which is a really high precision brush. But yeah, the drawing skulls on not so much on a penny, but I'm trying to say like a head of a pin, but actually a bit bigger than that. But that sort of size, drawing skulls at that level rather than a penny, which is about the size of an American cent, isn't it? I think, or American penny. But yeah, utterly amazing. And there's I've forgotten the guy who does it now. But there's a guy who uses who does artworks on pens, fountain pens. So he does artwork on fountain pens, and he's using things like the Infinity there to do them, and it's utterly amazing. I mean, the size of the skulls you're talking about there, if I recall them correctly, I probably couldn't see them without my glasses on, never mind draw one. I'll just put him back to one side now, if that's okay. We shall carry on with Felix here. There's actually an interesting crossover here between this and airbrushing, as I mentioned during those lines. With airbrushing, if you start paint flowing and then move your airbrush to draw a line, you get a blob, or a big dot from which the line comes out of, and if you stop moving before you let go of the paint, you get another blob at the other end. It's a classic mistake that beginners make, and we've all gone through it, because it takes time to learn to develop the technique of moving your airbrush, turning the paint on while you're still moving it at the point where you want it to go, and turning it off but still moving it at the point where you want it to stop, and you keep moving the airbrush, and in doing that you don't actually get those blobs. And the trick is not to make it take too long, otherwise you get a tapered line, but it takes a bit of skill to develop, and I've got to do the same thing here, because if I just put this down and draw away from it, I get a dark blob at the start and then it tapers off, and if I stop before I lift it off, I'll get a dark mark at the end, and you can't really see it, but I'm seeing little dots here, which means that I am forgetting my technique and I'm starting and stopping before I lift off. So I've got to remember to effectively land this like an aeroplane, do a touch and go and take off again, and in doing that I don't get the blob either at the start or at the front, at the end. But I do have to be very careful still not to stop every line in the same place, because if I do that, just the shading effect means it's like drawing a line with a pencil, which you don't get the blob effect. But if you stop in the same place every time, you get a dark mark if you try and go over it, because it's every line ended in the same place. When you go over it again, you've added to the overlap, and you effectively darken that little tiny overlap area, and it looks like a line. So what you have to do is to sort of make lines of various lengths till you make your edge ragged, and that way when you go over it again from from a different starting point, it blends in a lot better, and you don't end up having to deal with this overlay which has created a thick band. I actually find it amazing how so many techniques actually cross over between various art forms. And I'm working too fast again, I have to slow down. I also have a tendency while I'm talking to try and use the brush or use the pen at the speed that I'm talking at. Air on, paint off, air off. Yeah. And keep it moving while ever the paint's on. Yeah. Red Bull. If it doesn't keep you weight loss, it's just expensive sugar. You might as well drink fizzy water, which you can get for about great big bottle for about 18p in the supermarket. I do that and mix it with squash, so I end up with like fizzy orange or fizzy lemon or whatever, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper than buying the proprietary stuff. Doesn't work for Coke, of course, but yeah. So I'm just working my way backwards down the nose here. Still trying to keep, at least at this part here of the nose, keep the right angle for the hair. As we start to come down this bit of the nose here, it tends to come in a curve. It does the fur, so you can just about see it on the reference image because he's sort of black and he's got sort of like a salt and pepper effect, but it sort of curves downwards and away. So the nose, you get like a sleek effect down the side of the nose, but just up around here, it's still fairly radial from this point. Oh yes, Schlur, like that stuff. So does my wife. She drinks the whole bottle in sort of one sitting. I was about to say one go, but yeah, Schlur's nice. Especially if you've got the non. I think there's an alcoholic version of Schlur as well. That's a for those people that may not be familiar. It's kind of a fruit flavoured, fizzy-ish drink. Comes in green bottles, green conical shaped bottles, if I remember correctly. Okay, this fur is going down, at a medium tone. It wants to be a lot darker, basically as dark as I can get it, like it was on the on Junior that you saw earlier. But I'll do that in multiple stages. Partly because it's easier to do in multiple stages. But if you look at the reference image, this side of his face here is really, really dark. But up here, where the light's shining on it, you've got a lighter patch, and just across here. If I do this in stages, what I can do is do this to that point, then leave it and do this again, and it'll go darker, and I won't actually have to consciously try and make it dark. It just kind of comes by accident to some extent. You get that just by going over it again, so you're not having to sort of try and balance things out. You just, by doing it in layers almost, you don't do that bit, you do that bit. Plus, in actual fact, his fur, looking at it, is brown, not black. So it looks black just because it's against the white. So again, if I don't go too dark across here, that will show up as well. I'm sure you'll enjoy the other type, even if you have picked the wrong one up. Lost. I can't actually. I'm sure there is, but I can't actually remember whether there's an alcoholic version of it. It's a light alcoholic one, even if it is, but it's not. But that Schlur stuff is nice. You'll find you can easily drink the bottle and not share it. Especially if you make it cold. It's good. Keep it in the fridge, or at least put it in the fridge for several hours. Never tried it with ice, but it's a lot nicer cold, as most fizzy stuff is. I'm not sure you can see it. I was going to say you can sort of see the banding effect that I'm getting because of the overlay effect I was talking about earlier, so I've got to be just a little bit careful to avoid that. It's not too hard to correct. It's just going in between the bands and darkening them down, but it's easier if you can avoid getting them to start with. Because it just saves you the extra work, and the fun is making the piece, not going back and correcting your mistakes. And if you were trying to do this commercially, then of course time costs pennies, well, pounds, but in the UK, but time costs money, and so if you can avoid doing something, doing a job twice, then that's what is good to learn. Okay, so there's about the limit of that. Just trying to judge the points at which the fur starts changing its orientation. Because despite the fact you've got the swirl here, there's on this particular cat, the fur down the side of the nose here is very much up and down, even though it's away from the swirl at this point here. It's not particularly obvious that there's a horizontal lines coming away from here, so it's turning fairly quickly to go both ways. Sorry, I'm just catching up on stream. Yeah. Oh dear. There's some similar bottles to Schlur. I've forgotten the make now, but they make some very nice flavoured water, and they also do cordials, which is of course dehydrated water. It's to be watered down afterwards, and the bottles are almost identical, and we used to buy quite a few, and if you accidentally buy the cordial version, the first time you pour it out, if you pour it out, that looks a bit thick, and you take a drink and it's extremely sweet and syrupy, and so when Lost says she's hanging a washing, it actually means she's running to the shop for alcoholic beverages. Okay, remember that code in the future. Different people work this in different ways. You'll notice here I'm rotating the piece rather than rotating my hand. It's easier for me to work this way. Other people may find it differently, but by doing this, what I'm employing is my arm to create these lines with, rather than my fingers. It's a little, so I've got like a pivot point on my elbow, if you like, so I'm doing a swing like this, but I'm doing it in short movements. It takes less effort, shall we say, for me, rather than moving my hands, and by moving, and I can keep the same angle and keep the tool in the same position, and just move the wood around, which I can then control with my other hand. So I'm kind of load sharing. different people work different ways. There's no right way and no wrong way in any of this. It's all whatever's the easiest for the person that's doing it. And kind of like, if it works for you, don't let anybody tell you really you're doing it wrong. Okay. So, again, a nice start on the bridge of his nose there. Chilnanigans, good evening and welcome to the stream. I'm guessing fair enough is in reference to my don't let anybody tell you you're doing it wrong. I trust you're enjoying what you're seeing. If you're not sure what it is, and I've just realised I forgot to change my stream title, this is Pyrography, creating images with heat on, in this case, wood, although plenty of other materials are available to do it on. I've seen it done on leather, particularly card. It can be done on, it gets done on bone. It can actually be done on ivory as well, although of course ivory these days is a prescribed material, so basically you can't do it on ivory because you can't do anything with ivory. But sailors a long time ago used to do a form of pyrography on ivory using hot needles, which they heated over a little spirit burner on ships, because you don't want a lot of fire on the ship, and they did it in bone, and it gets called scrimshaw, if I remember correctly, and it's literally black. It's all black, and they create the pictures in the ivory, again just using the hot needle. And there's some really lovely stuff which is done that way. So I'll come down here. So again, I'm doing the talking to myself and only saying certain words. I am just judging where the fur comes down in an angle here, in a curve, and this is the transition between the black and the white. And I'm just judging the right place at which I want to start what I'm doing here, because again, the fur comes down and changes direction. And just below there, so I'm looking at the reference image. The bit I'm seeing as kind of where it stops for the moment is just below this little bump here, which is actually just black fur, so it's about this position here. So now, having said before I was working with the curve of my arm, I'm kind of working backwards at the moment, so I'm using my hand to do that. And it's actually quite difficult to work a reverse curve once you're used to doing it the other way. So it's a matter for practice, but what we're just going to do is turn the wood around, and then I can work the curve in the right direction. One thing that's with using this particular pen and using it in this fashion, which is using the tip, it's meant to be basically held at 45 degrees so that the flat bit of this flat shader is held on the wood, and you use the full face of it. Because I'm holding it up like this to use the point, the heat which is coming off of here, which is about the sort of heat of a candle flame, is coming straight up into my fingers. And it's like holding your fingers over a candle flame. You don't actually, as long as you do it not that close. You don't actually burn yourself, but it gets quite hot, and sort of it feels like it's burning, but you know it's not, type of thing. And I'm getting that now, just here. It's one of the things that tends to limit how long you can do this for, because if you are getting heat from the tool into your hand, then you can only do it for so long before it starts to get uncomfortable. Luckily, this isn't too bad, and I can quite easily go for the length of a stream. But sometimes, and some of the tools that I use for this, it does get quite hot, and you either have to take breaks or stop. Little tiny short strokes really here, because that's what the fur actually is at this point. Very, very short hairs, laid very, very flat to the skin. If you ever run your fingers along a cat's nose past the swirl, but this bottom end here, it's extremely silky, and you won't feel any give at all, because there's basically next to no fur covering the skin. As you come up to the swirl, the hair tends to stand straight up out of the skin, and you can actually feel it kind of bristly. But again, it's next to no give because it's so short. I'm kind of exaggerating it slightly as well here, so that I can blend it in. If I literally did strokes that are as short as the hair should be, if I was doing it in scale, I'd just be touching it, and I'd actually create a completely different effect on here, a stippling effect, which wouldn't look as good. Or rather, I'd have to do a lot more work to make it look as good. Of course, another artist might prefer to use that technique and make it look really good without any effort whatsoever, because they've practiced it a lot. And I'm going, ow, I'm having a rest because this is hot. Sorry, I'm not catching it with stream. I'm getting engrossed in what I'm doing. Both I'm drinking. Yeah. Do you do any form of artwork, Childanigans? That sounds like personal experience. No, no one can be Bob Ross. No one is. That bloke did quite a lot for painting, and the techniques. No, I'm not that good. Not that good. I have used. Well, I do use some of his techniques because they work fantastically amazing. But I did once have somebody. I was at work, and didn't believe I could do painting at all. So Microsoft Paint, and using his technique, if you like, for creating the mountains and the and snow on them.